Weirding Way Media.
Welcome to episode 92 of the Filmumentaries podcast. This is Jamie Benning here, and I'm talking to you from my house here in London, England. It's the 18th of December, a lot later than I would hope to get this episode out, but it's the Christmas month. It's a busy month. And this is the first episode of this month, so there'll be another episode coming very near the end of December. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. The podcast is dedicated to preserving film history, and you can treat this and the 91 episodes that came before it as an archive for entertainment and research, and I hope you find it enjoyable. For the regular listeners, thank you as always for joining me and for your continued support. A special shout out to the wonderful people supporting the podcast via Patreon. That's patreon.com/Jamie Benning. And your support is so crucial to keep this podcast going. I'm aiming for at least another 30 to 35 patrons to make this a financially viable exercise. So if you love the podcast and would buy me a pint or a coffee if we met, consider supporting the podcast with $12 for a whole year, $12 or your currency equivalent. Plus, you get 10% discount when you support the podcast for an entire year. So rather than doing it monthly, consider the one-off payment of $12 as a Christmas gift to me. There's still time. Check out the various tiers and perks on patreon.com/Jamie Benning. And you can also support the podcast by grabbing some exclusive clothing at filmumentaries.tmill, that's TEEMILL.com. I've switched to Tmill for better quality clothing because I wasn't impressed with the previous company I used. And there are new designs on the way, thanks to my collaboration with my talented artist friend, Pete Starling. The links for the Patreon and the store in the show notes. And if Patreon or the store isn't your thing, you can still support the podcast by sharing, liking, subscribing, and leaving a review. This is a very small podcast. It's just me and my laptop and a guest or guests, and it can only thrive with your help in spreading the word. You can also help by heading to JediTimeline.com in your region to grab our amazing book. I say our because co-author is Justin Berger, and we made Return of the Jedi, the Unauthorized Timeline. It's a comprehensive cataloguing of the entire history of Return of the Jedi, covering production, toy lines, video games, books, comics, and more, including exclusive, never-before-seen diary entries from key crew members, an introduction from the producer, Jim Bloom, and the softcover version is currently available for about £20 or your currency equivalent on Amazon. So check it out. If you go to JediTimeline.com, all the details are there, or you can go to Amazon in your region and search for Jedi Timeline. Also, remember you can find me on Twitter at JamieSWB, and there's a link tree there on my profile to all my various sites, including the Vimeo and YouTube channels, where you'll find hours of material on these films that we all love. Now, for this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Tom Spina. Tom is an avid Star Wars enthusiast, restoration specialist, and the founder of Tom Spina Designs and Regal Robot. And in our conversation, we delve into his early love for Star Wars and those toys, always about the toys, his passion for computer graphics on his Amiga, his brief stint as a TD in live TV, and his current work in restoring historical movie props. We also touch on his Star Wars Celebration panel, his interactions with the film saga's crew, props, and monsters, and it's a fascinating insight into his creative process, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. So here it is, my conversation with Tom Spina, and I'll be back at the end for a bit more jabbering on. So Tom, where did it all begin for you? Were you just one of those kids that had all the toys and, the curtains and the duvet cover?
Never had the duvet cover.
I didn't have all the toys. That was a big point of contention with me and my parents. I'll tell you that. Um, the storybook actually I had before anything.
Mm.
Even before I saw the movie, it was, and I still have my copy of it. It's got my name scribbled on the inside, front and back covers, just in case
Wise.
someone, at school tried to make off with it. I could identify that book. And it's really cool that I've still got that. That was Star Wars for me at the start of all of it. I didn't have my own car yet, so I was dependent on my folks getting me to the movies, and they weren't as anxious to see it, I suppose, as I was. But
How old were you
yeah,
then
that's
back in '77? I'm
so
not trying
I
to butter you up here,
was.
Tom, but you don't look old enough to have been around
Well, I
back then.
appreciate that. No, I just turned 50, so I was 4 years old when the movie came out. I was 5 when I finally saw it, and it was you know foundational. Like that's an age where something can hit someone and just ingrain itself into the fiber of their being.
Yeah, I mean, it happened to so many of us. I mean, I was born in '76, so I've just turned 47, so I don't
Right.
remember a time when Star Wars didn't exist. I mean, it's
Yes.
probably the same for you in many ways, but it's funny, isn't it? Like, I think there was somebody said to me once, if you can find a job doing what you loved when you were 6 or 7, like what you were into when you're 6 or 7, you've hit
Right.
the dream, the jackpot, and you seem to have done
Yep.
that. I mean, was there a period for
Jackpot.
you
Yep.
where Star Wars wasn't a part of your life? I mean, obviously there are parts of our lives that Star Wars doesn't enter into, partners, children, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, and
Right.
other activities. But was it always there? Was it always in the background for you, or did
I'm
you have
sorry.
the
There's
wilderness
what
years?
now? You're saying there's parts of life that Star Wars doesn't? All
Well,
right.
I
I
mean,
don't
you
know if
you
I agree with
remember
that.
those years though. Like, I mean, where am I thinking? Sort of
Yeah.
between '86 to '91 or something like that, before the
Even beyond.
Timothy
Yeah. No,
Zahn novels. Yeah.
I, I was probably one of those sort of like keeping the torch going during that time. Yeah. So for me, yeah, I do remember the time before Star Wars, which is kind of strange because it's like a very on the cusp thing. For me, it was Wizard of Oz and King Kong and all of that stuff that I was obsessed with until Star Wars hit. And then it was just like, oh well, nothing else exists. That's it. Um, but through the '80s, so the thing that hooked me about Star Wars, I it wasn't so much the story of it, it was the making of it. And even as a child, that was what I was driven by. That was what got me going. And, you know, it was the creatures, especially. And by the time From Star Wars to Jedi, the making of a saga comes out, um, which wonderfully focused on Phil Tippett and his crew's work, that was just a like, oh, okay, that's a thing I can do. And much to my parents' dismay, that was just going to be it at that point. I
Was
did.
it genuinely a moment where you thought I could do that? Like, because I think for a lot of
Oh,
people,
yeah,
for me included, I kind of didn't really think I could do that. I just thought, oh, these are made. They don't just arrive in the cinema. I mean, that was probably earlier,
right.
maybe between Empire and Jedi, but you actually thought this is something I could do. You saw yourself in Phil Tippett and all those guys.
I don't know if I would be that. I don't know if I would go quite that far with Phil, but I mean, I immediately was mimicking whatever I saw on the screen, and like from the time I even going back to the first film, and we would have these things in school where the teacher would give everybody a paper lunch bag, and you were supposed to make a mask out of it, and everybody just took crayons and drew on the front of it, and I would go to the teacher desk, and I'd be like, well, what do you have that I can work with? I see scissors, I got a stapler, there's a roll of masking tape. Like, let's do this. And, was making three-dimensional things out of the paper bags. So, it's just, I was just, give me a couple of extra. Let's make this for real. And, by the time we're talking, I'm 10 or 11 when From Star Wars to Jedi hits, and I managed to tape it. And here's the really crazy thing about that. I had no idea that was on. Like there was no planning. There was no this was going to be on the air thing. My local mom and pop video stores like didn't have this. It was we were flipping through the channels, all like 5 of them one day, and went to channel 21, which was one of our local public broadcasting channels, and there was something with Star Wars. And so, very luckily, my mom had a VHS tape in the machine that, I was like, this is now going to get recorded over no matter what. Mom, I'm hitting the button. And we just started recording it. And I think I was only about 5 minutes into it when I hit record, luckily. So I recorded, 95% of that show.
Which,
that's probably not the correct math. But
I was going to say 5 minutes into that is just the kind of movie clip, and then you're getting into the meat of it. I had a similar experience as well. It was like, I think I was at my grandparents' house. My parents were all chatting with my grandparents in the other room, and I turned the TV on, and there it was. And I remember sort of scrabbling to put this tape in.
Yeah.
And then also when it was finished, taking the little tab out to make sure my sister didn't record
right.
some crap over it.
Like, oh, no one's going over this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I wore that tape out, and it was just constantly just pausing and sketching, just, okay, that looks like it's a piece of tubing with a string running through it or something. That was in my mind. That's what a cable was. So it's like, okay, that's pulling on the nostril of the Gamorrean. So I would take, whatever I could find in my dad's garage, which luckily was bountiful. And he had a friend, he called him George the Junkman. And you would go to this guy's house, and he had a 2-car garage filled with, I don't know, everything. Like, and we would go, and I'd be like, do you have any, foam rubber? And he's like, well, I found a roll of foam rubber here. It's 1/2-inch foam rubber. Perfect. And I would take that and I would cut and pattern it and try and make a Gamorrean head out of it or whatever. I was trying to remake Return of the Jedi in my basement. I had built Jabba the Hutt out of this blue bed foam that my grandfather had gotten me, and like some curtains and things like that. Like, it was literally like whatever I had just went into trying to make this stuff. Cardboard and masking tape and wire and spit and whatever else just happened to be around. And yeah, I mean, I thought this is not only what I could do, this is what I would do. This was, from that age. And it took, going into the 80s, getting further into makeup effects and learning about Tom Spina and Rick Baker and Rob Bottin, and, just the pantheon of 80s rock star makeup artists, and getting Tom Savini's book, Grand Illusions or Bizarro, depending on which title you got, which was, there's the first real information I have on any of this stuff. Not just going by whatever Mark Hamill as narrator said that was in the script, usually wrong for whatever they're actually doing in the shot too. Not helpful, Mark. Thanks. But that time, I start getting into more of the horror stuff. There's some great, fun slasher things happening in the 80s. I had a friend whose father was really into the old vintage horror stuff. Everything from, the 30s and 40s all the way through the Hammer stuff. And he introduced me to all of that. And thank goodness, because, oh man, did that take hold. But Star Wars never went away. It was always along the side of whatever I was doing. If I was making, some kind of a monster, I remember making like a vampire with half his face torn off as a mask or something like that. Right alongside it, I'm trying to figure out how do I make a Cantina bad guy mask, and trying everything from boat fiberglass that I found at the hardware store to, mold building rubber latex that I found at a local art store to plaster of Paris to, plaster bandages, like just paper mache, whatever I could get my hands on. I felt stranded. I'd read Tom Savini's book and stuff, which is probably even a little later than some of this, but and I would read about things in some of these magazines, Starlog and Fangoria, and then, getting into like Gore Zone and Deep Red, some of these like more out there, like horror magazines. and seeing what people are doing and going like, they're talking about going to shops out in LA. And I'm just like, I'm not in Burbank. I can go there. Like, and not really putting together the like, all right, this is like, I could write them a letter and maybe get a paper catalog, like some kind of photocopied catalog. And eventually I did some of that. And I got some proper like slip latex and some cold foam latex, like Cryolan, that like, cold cure 3-part is really just a soft polyfoam with a self skin, but everybody called it cold foam latex. I was like, yeah, my mom won't let me use the oven, but like I can make stuff out of this. So anyway, but yeah, no, Star Wars never went away. And then the role-playing game came out, and that's when it really came back for me, because now we were getting a look at more of the props. There were great behind the scenes photos, not behind the scenes photos, but like close-ups of different things in the source book. And my friends and I dove into that. We were the Star Wars version of the Dungeons and Dragons nerds.
Sure. Yeah. No, I remember those cards because I remember seeing some of those characters like that for the first time, like you say, that close up. And the other thing that
that's the even later. That's the Decipher cards.
Yeah, right.
I'm talking about West End Games.
West End Games. Okay,
the role playing game, which had a source book. Oh, the Decipher cards were, oh my gosh, that was
airbrushed a bit,
trove.
but yeah. And another
always, yes.
and of course later there was the big what was it called? The Archives book, or no, not Archives. What was the big
Chronicles.
The Chronicles? I remember buying that from the cinema bookstore here in London, paying an amazing amount of money for it, like £150 or something here. But just seeing photos I'd never seen before of some of these characters that are behind you right now. It's interesting you brought up horror as well, because there is a bit of a horror aspect to those characters in the cantina. I mean, my daughter, who's now 8, I think when she first saw a bit of Star Wars, she's like, "What's wrong with that guy?" It was the cantina band. He looks like
what's wrong with
baby.
Your face?
It's like a giant baby. Like, what's going on? And then, you've just got this array of characters that have just come out of the imagination of Stuart Freeborn and co, and the other stuff that was shot in LA. And there is some of it's kind of off the shelf, of course, isn't it? And some of it has that horror twist to it.
Even the off the shelf stuff, really, it's when Rick Baker says like, "Oh, I used a Halloween mask Wolfman," it's still a Wolfman he made. He just made it in '73 to sell as a Halloween mask, not as something for the movie. He's still disappointed that got a close up, but the one I fight for, the gray looking wolf with the red eyes.
Oh yeah,
the Defil, I guess is what it's called. He calls it a bat demon guy. It is a rework of one of those brown Wolfman masks, but he like cut the whole snout off. He redid the whole thing to be more of a bat, and that was used in Bob Burns' Halloween special, the thing in the attic that was based on The Exorcist.
Yeah,
and that mask, to me, that holds up, and it's still like we got to restore that for old Bob years back, and it's freaking amazing. Like so it guffs me a little bit when they cut that. Whenever I watch the special edition. And
it's a shame.
They're showing me the back half of a different mask instead of this great Rick Baker mask. Like, what are you doing? Come on.
I know. Did you have the masks as a kid, like the Don Post masks? Were they a feature of your collection?
I had a few. I lusted after them.
Yeah.
There was a local magic shop at the same mall where I would go and pump my quarters into the Star Wars arcade game incessantly.
Yeah.
Still my favorite game of all time.
So good.
So good. It's
good. As a kid, you just felt like you were in the movie. I mean, genuinely, you were in this cockpit.
Oh, yeah.
The sit-down version, of course, with the yoke in your hand, and just, it doesn't get much better.
We only had the stand-up at my local, but there was... so this is actually a neat little thing. So there's a little theme park called Adventureland, which is in Farmingdale, New York, kind of near here. It was the inspiration for the movie Adventureland, and it's been as a backdrop in a bunch of movies. But they had the sit-down version, and when we would go there, the stand-up, I felt like I was in the movie. The sit-down, forget it. Like I'm just like the world disappeared. Yep. I am in the trench. This is it. Here goes nothing. Wrong movie, but
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was huge, and we actually just did. I literally just put it on the website yesterday because they just installed it. We got back in touch with that park about 2 years ago and had been talking with them about some ideas, and we built them a 6-foot bronze look statue of their mascot to be kind of like the little icon of the park over there. And it's
Nice.
just like, that was my childhood park growing up. My dad would always take me on the antique cars and let me drive, even though it had the track. I like just as much as I was flying in the trench, I was driving. And it's really cool to have done something that's now at that park. It's a 60-year-old place. I kind of wish my dad was still around to see it because I think he'd get a real kick out of that.
The circle is complete kind of thing. Yeah, it's great when that comes around.
Yeah, it was a good feeling, man.
So to point out then, you are on the East Coast, you're in New York, right? So
yeah,
you're kind of on the wrong side of the country for what you do in a way. I mean, you're nodding knowingly about that. Has the option of moving out west ever kind of been on the horizon for you?
It's funny. Right after college, it was, or even in college, it was in my mind. A good friend of mine made the trip out, and he wound up, trying to get the studio job things for a while. And he wound up, in selling business materials and IT equipment and things like that. And he built a great business out of it. He's got a wonderful life, but it wasn't what we were hoping, I guess. The thing that ended up happening though was in college, parallel to all of this, because I wasn't busy enough with all my Star Wars stuff in my basement laboratory of makeup effects and foam rubber. I was also playing guitar like 3 or 4 hours a day and building puppets. Because the other obsession of mine was the Muppet Show growing up. And that predates Star Wars just a little bit. And certainly Sesame Street was big, but the Muppet Show was really like, oh, okay. And, similar path of Muppets and Men. There's a great book that was in the local library about the making of the Muppet Show. And they had done, I assume it was a half-hour special of the making of the Muppet Show. And they, this is a little later. This is probably like the 81, 82 season. And that was another one where it was just like, oh, this
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Oh, look it up. It
I will.
Anybody who's watching, just stop this, go look at, come back, but
Pause,
look it up and go watch. But it's so good. And it's another really great raw look behind the scenes, showing you not what's behind the curtain, in this case of puppetry, what's under it. And it inspired me to build all kinds of puppets, Muppet replicas, my own characters, whatever. And so in college, I'm going for TV and film, but mostly I'm using the projects as an excuse to either, dress like Indiana Jones and do dumb stunts with my friends, to build new puppets and characters and put them into scenarios or whatever else, or just to try special effects, to try luma keys, to try chroma keys, to figure out, can we double up on something? Can I get something that, is comped in the front and something else that's behind it that looks, I just messing with whatever I could. I was into computer graphics too at the time, working with an Amiga 1000, called that because it had 1000 kilobytes of RAM.
I remember because the Amiga 500 was the like consumer level, but if you had the thousands, you were like, big business. Yeah.
I was a king, basically. Like that was, and I had won a couple of local like art competitions for some animation stuff. I mostly was trying to do the equivalent of 2D, like Warner Brothers-y type animation, but using the computer to do it, because to sit down as a person and hand draw and paint all those cells wasn't going to work. But I could use the computer to carry things over and to tweak frames and stuff. And even with just 1,000 kilobytes of RAM, I was able to make a couple of like 30-second or 1-minute cartoons. And I made all the sound effects on my guitar and things like that. Like it's just whatever I could make work. And it was a lot of fun. And had computer tech been stronger at the time, that's probably where I would have ended up, because I really enjoyed it.
What software was
But
that
doing
then using? What were you using on the Amiga at the time for
so I
that?
was using D-Paint was the primary
Yeah, right. Yeah.
thing. Which had, I think at the time, 32 colors at a time.
Uh-huh.
Um, so a little limiting. Eventually, I got a machine for my house. I think it was a 1200, and I had a Genlock Super Gen SX or FX, whatever it was called, so that I could lock graphics over video. So now I could do
Mm.
titles, and that was the big leagues. And then there was, I think it was about $300 at the time. There was a chroma key that you could buy, and it would work if you had the Genlock already.
Right.
So I invested in that, and with our puppets, we were doing green screen stuff in the house. We set up it was blue. We had a big blue velvet sheet that I got from a local fabric store. We pumped a bunch of light on it, and we figured out that, putting some yellow lighting gels on the backlight for the characters helped them get better separation. Like we were working it out, and wound up doing some puppet stuff in college that we sent it to the Henson Company just as a goof, because we had done, our own version of the Muppet Show, basically, me and my buddies. And we had a ton of fun with it. I sent it in with no expectation. I wound up getting a call from Kevin Clash, the guy who plays Elm, and didn't know who he was, though, because I was kind of tuned into the Muppet Show, but he was post Muppet Show, and I thought he was just some producer or whatever. And through that wound up, this is one of those, and I'm sure you've encountered these moments in your life where, you've given the wrong answer. He asked about, the puppet stuff we were doing, and I think I made it sound too much like the puppets were just an excuse to shoot stuff on video, and that, wasn't necessarily, my true calling to be a puppeteer or anything like that. But I did find out later, I was like, I think I must have seen another behind the scenes thing, maybe the Jim Henson hour behind the scenes, and saw, it's like Kevin Clash. I'm like, I know that name, son of a bitch. So I drafted a little letter, and I said, what? I'm going to go to the Henson office. They're in New York City. I'm on the island. I could take a train. It'll take me an hour. I'm just going to go right to the office. I'm going to see if he's there. And if not, I'll leave this letter for him. And not realizing, like, of course he's not there. That's not, like, he doesn't have a desk job. But I wound up meeting a woman who was an executive or producer or whatever there. And she had seen the tape as well, though, because apparently they got a kick out of it and shared it around.
Right.
And so she gave me a tour of their just beautiful headquarters. That it was this wonderful townhouse on, I believe that was one on 69th Street. They had the workshop and the carriage house on, I think that was 67. It could be getting the streets reversed. It's been a while, but it had, a beautiful stained glass window of Ernie and Bert. It had wonderful paintings on the wall. It had, Jim had just passed away maybe 2 years earlier, 2 or 3 years, I guess. And there were, things he had built. His office was still there. They hadn't, reused that space at all.
Right.
How could you?
No.
So he had this like light up pink moose head here that he had built out of paper mache. He had a shrine to the almighty dollar that he made out of pennies, like just wonderful, wonderful, awe-inspiring, art-inspiring art, right? And so, I had this magical visit that really just came out of, and this is like, anytime anybody asks me, it's like, how do you get to do what you wanted to do when you were 6 or 7 years old, right? And it's just like, you do it to the best of your ability. And it's like, you basically just keep doing it until someone tells you to stop, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's like, nobody gets anywhere planning. Like it's like, yes, you've got a plan, but you got to do it. And then you got to push. And, here it was just, my own gumption of thinking I could go there.
Mm.
They had every right to just go like, "Who? No, what? You have something great? You put it through the slot. Take off, kid." You know,
Yeah,
I
but
really
your
got
passion,
lucky.
your passion clearly counts for a lot here. I mean, you're a very enthusiastic person. Whenever I've seen you interviewed, the passion for what you do comes across instantly.
Thank you.
People like to see that, and it's. I feel it. I really feel it, even
Yeah.
through even
Well,
through
you've got
even
it
through
too.
Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have it, but I'm a understated British guy. I'm not allowed
Right.
to kind of really
And
show my
I'm a loud
emotions.
Italian New Yorker. So,
Exactly. What else could you do?
that's right.
When did you first kind of look into getting an original prop from Star Wars? Because I know you have a collection yourself. Now it's almost impossible, right? I mean, you look
It's
for people
tough now.
listening here.
Yeah.
For people listening,
It's a
Tom is sitting in front of multiple cabinets with heads and hands in of many characters that you would recognize from the cantina. But yeah, I mean, now it's impossible, really. You have to be
it's
multi-millionaire these days. But
yeah, or you have to have just started at the right time, I guess. But I'll say this. Maybe, the sort of the high ends, the better kind of pieces are a little out of reach for your average collector. But the fact that those pieces have done so well have shaken loose so much other material. And you've got folks like, Stephen and Brandon over at Prop Store of London who do such a great job of getting this stuff out there. They've got a couple of auctions every year and they've got tons of stuff on their site. And I'll tell you what, if you went in with a couple $1,000s, you can come away with some decent Star Wars pieces. And slowly build up to a collection where maybe, and this is really how it was for me. I didn't, come in at, giant purchases of very expensive mess. I started collecting replica props initially, started building replica props really more than anything. I didn't, in a time before the internet, I didn't know you could buy replica props. It was just like, I wanted to make whatever I saw.
yeah,
I did plenty of that. And ultimately, it was through Prop Store and a fellow named Fuller French who had been, kind of circulating a list of sci-fi props that he had that I wound up picking up a couple of Death Star pieces, Death Star panels.
Yeah.
And, those were things that like the fan club used to give away back in the day. And so there were plenty of them made for the movie as well. And though a lot of that stuff got thrown in the bin, they did, a lot of them did make it out there into private hands. And so, that was a pretty good entry level sort of thing. And then there's other things like there's paperwork and call sheets and behind the scenes stuff and Polaroids and things that I find infinitely cool and fascinating. And, of all the masks and props and things I've got, I've got Stuart Freeborn's notes from the cantina. And it's, I would say about 90% of what those notes were. There were a handful of them relating to Greedo that I think went off with one of the masks to Greedo, but the rest of it are there. And, that to me has been gold mine, especially doing all the panels for Star Wars Celebration and stuff. Pablo Hidalgo and I would just like pour over those notes and just try and connect characters to actors and, development to the final character. And, they were calling this a hippo then, but we think it turns out to be this guy. And, that kind of thing. This was the Wasp and that was this.
I love that stuff. Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. And so, yeah, I lucked out in that when I did start to get into screen use stuff, replica props were selling for a lot of money. So I could trade my replica collection for a nice stack of dollar bills that I could then hand to, either folks that worked on movies that kept stuff that I got lucky enough to know, or to places like Prop Store or, other auction houses that maybe were auctioning off things I wanted. I work really hard to keep my collection sort of dollar neutral, so to speak, and not dump a lot of money into it. I'm very, it's weird. I'm sort of, it's I never want to feel braggadocious about it. I feel like there's, anything I've got, it's because I genuinely love the item or the maker or the movie it's connected to. All of this is, everything you do, everything I do in life is just about getting closer to these movies that moved us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Whether it's buying the action figures as a kid, you wanted to
yeah,
play with those characters, or you were just in the backyard or in the garden or whatever,
yeah.
playing, pretending to be Luke Skywalker, or you were
Oh
wearing
gosh,
the mask, or you went to a fancy dress, or like when I was at
yeah.
college, I made a radio show about making movies, and of course, put Star Wars in there. I made a documentary about the Elstree Studios at college because I wanted to get Star Wars in there.
There you go.
You just always
Yeah,
find a way, and this, I guess, is the most grown-up version of having the toys, is what you've got really,
right.
because you've got the
Yeah,
things
yeah.
that were actually made for the
Well,
screen.
and I do still have the toys. I kept everything from when I was a kid,
Great.
save for a handful of things, some that got lost in a move, sadly. But I've been slowly going back and buying, whatever got lost, and then realizing like, oh, okay, let's see, these are things I either never knew came out
Yeah.
because the way we knew what was out was, if you saw it on the back of the action figure or in that little flip book, or if you saw it in the store. And if your mom didn't happen to take you to, Toys R Us that in that 6 month period, you might miss stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've been going back and filling in some little holes. But I was really diligent about the 3 3/4 figures as a kid. I kept them all together with their weapons, and weapons were another bag, but I kept them all. And I got as many as I could. I think I was only missing a very small handful that I picked up in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
One of those deals in a parking lot. I found a guy in the newspaper that, it's like,
Yeah,
hey, do
I
you
had a
have a
few of those.
man?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I got a man. Bring the cash. Meet me at the Walmart parking lot. It's just
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay.
I definitely had a few of those. It's funny you say about the card back thing, because I always associate those card backs with my parents being pissed off because they were like, I thought you had every figure, and now there's 79 of them. Like,
I love it.
and then
Yeah,
of course,
that's it.
it wasn't until I guess the early 90s when I found out they were collectible again that I even found out about the last 17. I think I was aware of Luke
Oh,
Stormtrooper, but I didn't have a Manaman or Barada or any of those guys. And I've had
yeah.
them. I've had them several times in my collection. But a few years ago, I sold them and only kept the ones that I had as a kid. That's what I
Nice.
decided on in the end, just to get the
That's a
best.
good call.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But that's the thing with
I,
Star Wars, though, isn't it? There are so many worlds within worlds of, because you could collect the figures, but you might just collect Vader. You might just collect Vader on an Empire card, and you might collect him only on a US card. And there's just so much room for Star Wars fandom.
It's amazing to me, especially now as someone doing licensed Star Wars stuff as well, to see how people collect this stuff and what attracts them, and to intentionally offer stuff that you're not going to get elsewhere, and to find ways to introduce the making of the film into collecting. Collecting real props is one thing. And as that's when you're dealing with things that are one of one,
Mm-hmm.
that's a pretty limited collectible. But when you get into stuff where it's 1 of 100, 1 of 200, whatever, now it's like, that's still pretty premium. That's still really special, but you can do it. You're not like, people aren't just completely shut out of it. Maybe happens a little bit with the screen stuff.
Yeah, one of the things I found out about the sort of prop collecting community, having kind of met, Dan Lanigan, who's got a big kind of indie collection, and obviously Brandon and Stephen. And, I know Jason DeBoard, who runs Julian's, CEO of Julian's. I actually had lunch with him the other day. It's just how small that prop collecting world
it is. I've had meals with every one of those people. I've spent days and days at Dan's house. Those were all good friends. And it's a tight-knit community. I feel it's getting bigger, I think. And I think a lot of that's down to, honestly, just the press push that Steven does.
Yeah.
Like, those
incredible.
guys are really ambassadors for it as a hobby, I think, beyond just like their own business. I think, they inspire people to get into this, which is brilliant. It's great. from both a business point of view and just from a hobby point of view. But no, it's a very tight knit community, and even the replica prop community was tight knit. That was where I met Jason and Brandon. I met Brandon. He was 14.
Yeah, digging around in the sand, trying to find bits of
I
crate
wasn't,
dragons.
But he was. But yeah, we met. He started the RPF, the replica prop forum, and that was something where he started it. Some folks took over. I came on to help out. Then I ran it for a while. Now Art Andrews runs it. Who's now also with Prop Store. Like, it's just, like you said, it's a tight community. But it was it's kind of, look, we share the same passions. We are obsessed with the same things, but everybody has their niche.
Yes.
It's like everybody has what they collect. Like you said, is this just the Vader on the Empire card? Is just the US card? Is that? Is it this? For me, the focus is really the Cantina stuff with some other things thrown in. But for the Star Wars stuff, look, there's no way for a mere mortal to own all the Star Wars props.
Yeah.
Unless you're George, you don't get to do that.
Yeah.
So
no, it kind of struck me though. Like, I've been to dinner with like Ryan Condal and Stephen Lay and a bunch of the British collectors. Just Christmas just gone, and it wasn't necessarily keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. But there was clearly a bit of that. But there was a lot of talking about. I had individual conversations or conversations with two sets of people at certain times throughout the evening. And I think all of them at some point had said that they'd stepped out of the way for their pal who wanted a particular item. So there is that. But I also wonder, given the sort of rise in interest in props, movie props in particular, since COVID, it seems to have gone crazy. If you ever have that moment when you're bidding where you think, well, who's this other person? I mean, I was going to say other guy. It's going to be a guy, right? Who's this other guy? Like, he's not in our circle. Who is this? Is it a museum bidding against us now?
Yeah, it's like I already talked to Gus and Mandel, and I know Dan's not bidding against me. Who is this? Oh yeah, that's definitely happened.
Has 100%. That crept in recently, do you think? Has that been a since COVID thing?
For sure.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, I mean, I've had times bidding on something where I thought, oh gosh, this was a Star Trek piece, but I was bidding on a spacesuit from like the original series Star Trek in that Christie's auction in 2006. And I had held off on bidding on anything else. It was one of the last items, and everything else that day was going pretty reasonably. And I thought, well, I'll throw a decent amount at this and I can probably go home with this, because even the other original series stuff wasn't going crazy. And it was like, it gets to a certain point and the bidding stalls and I'm the high bidder. I'm like, hey, all right. I got a chance to. And then someone comes in on a phone bid. I'm like, who is this? Like, I'm literally there with Stephen and Brandon and Rob Clyde and Andy Goulding and like all the people I know. And the movie Prop King site guys, Jason and Darren White are there, and a couple of other big hitters. We're all in the room. And I'm like looking around the room. It's like, none of them, it's a phone bidder. Like, who is this? And then I want to say, I go in another, like, I'm like, all right, let me go. And then, now you start making deals with yourself. Well, I could sell this and I'll do that. One more bid. Okay. All right. I'll sell that. And then I could do one more bid. And then another phone bidder comes in, and then the thing goes on for like another $100,000 past that point. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to get outbid, I don't want to be outbid by $1 or $200 or $500. I want to be outbid by $100,000.
Yeah.
Because then I know I was never in the running in the first place. But who that was beats me. Could have been Paul Allen. He was a big player at the time. Could have been him fighting with someone else or whatever. But yeah, it definitely happens. And it's always, like I said, you just don't want to be the underbidder. You don't want to be the guy who bid second to last.
Sure.
Because then the rest of your life, you're just going to go like, oh, I should have, if I just hit one more.
Yeah. I talking to museums as well, I went to the Academy Museum when I was out in LA last March, and, some amazing pieces in that collection. And one of the ones that I was drawn to was the 2001 spacesuit, because I think, that had been up in auction and there were a lot of people talking about what it might go for. And the museum won that item. When you're up against museums, that's a whole different realm, because who knows what their
Well,
budget might be.
it's interesting. I find the museums tend actually not to have that much of a budget, but
Really,
sometimes they do have like these angel bidders where
that
someone
are
will
gonna,
come in and
yeah,
get it for the
sure,
museum.
mm-hmm.
I know Leonardo DiCaprio has done that with a group of
Yes,
folks where they've bid on things to donate it to the Academy Museum. And yeah, it's like, what are you going to do that? I know Ben Stiller outbid me on a couple of Star Trek pieces at one
really,
point. I found out after the fact because
interesting.
those were other times where I was the underbidder. And I'm just going like, and there's the only time where it is good to be the underbidder when you find out that, because then you're like, oh, right. Okay. I had no chance. It's fine. He was just going to keep going. Wasn't
Yeah, yeah, it happens.
but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it is an interesting aspect of collecting. I mean, no one who collects is a fan of auctions.
mm.
Like I think
Stressful.
auction houses are fans of auctions, but I
Oh
don't
yeah.
think anyone else is.
Oh, I've seen the
Um,
commission percentage rates. I mean,
yeah,
I thought about
yeah.
bidding
No,
on
they
a.
do okay. If you're bidding, although they also definitely put a lot of work into those auctions. I am
Oh, of course, yeah,
constantly impressed with what they're pulling together.
yeah.
But yeah, it is. I've always, it's more special with me, some of the pieces where I picked them up through somebody who's worked on a movie and kept it, or, secondhand through some effects friends or something like that. That to me, there's more of a story there. There's more of
Yeah.
a connection there. There's more of a personal thing than just, how did you get this? I spent money. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like, okay,
absolutely.
great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You're special.
I'm aware that we're kind of 45 minutes in here, and we haven't really talked about your work, which is, of course,
That's fine.
the
Thanks,
massive part of
everybody.
your life.
Have
Yeah,
a good
bye.
day.
So, how did you like turn your passion, your hobby, into your job? What was that first step you took?
Um, so it's funny that fateful drive into the Muppet headquarters,
Yeah.
in a way, is a first step, because that got me introduced to some great folks, and I was clever enough to ask them, well, where do you build all this stuff? Because I don't see a workshop here. And they said, oh, we have a workshop a few blocks down. And I said, do you ever show people around there? Because that's really interesting to me. Um, and they said, get out of here, kid. No, they very nicely said, sure, I could set that up. Give me a call. Here's my number. And so, went home, called, and got a tour of the workshop. And then at the workshop, I asked, how do you hire people here? How do you, do you do internships? I'm in college. Can I do an internship here? And that led to an internship at Sesame Street, which was my, gateway to the industry. That was my first time on the set. That was my first time seeing things shot in a professional way. Luckily, not much different than we were doing it in college. The school I went to had a nightly news program that was on a local station. So, they had a pretty well set up TV studio, and they were pretty good course there in terms of getting you prepared for that. So that was nice to go in and not feel completely out of depth. But, I was an assistant to the puppet wrangler. So I was there handing the puppets back and forth to the performers, setting them up with arm rods, doing little repairs, going to what they called the Muppet room, which was a little storage room upstairs, and, pulling the characters for each day, and getting to sit there and go like, okay, I need to bring Grover downstairs, or here's Telly. Okay, I've got to get, Bert and Ernie for, they're needed in a couple of days. Like, wild stuff. And even better, got to be around people that now were, most of the crew had been there since the show started in the late 60s. The show was, I think, 25 years old the season I was on it. So it's 93, 94-ish. And the performers, other than, Jim and Richard Hunt, who had passed on, were all the original folks. So Jerry Nelson was there, and Carol Spinney, and Martin Robinson, and on down the line. All of these amazing men and women. Some of them I'd seen in books and magazines, some of them I'd seen in behind the scenes specials, and some I had just gotten to know because they were always under a camera and never in front of one. So I never got to even see who they were. But just wonderful, inviting, warm folks that, immediately made a somewhat lost feeling Long Island kid feel very at home on that set. And so, yeah, so that's when I put together the feeling I had when I was a kid that this is what I'm going to do, and the practical question of, yeah, but really? You know? And that was when it was like, wait, they can do it. I can do it. Yeah, they can do this for a living. Okay, that's now a thing. And I had to go home and tell my parents, I'm like, I just saw 100 people that do puppets and special effects and make stuff and make TV stuff for a living. And, you know, and you still think I'm supposed to be a cop or an accountant, which is weird because you're my parents and you've met me and you should know better. But it took some convincing on their end. But you know, you asked earlier why I didn't end up going to California. And so that internship then led to me meeting a fellow named Victor Yared, who has since gone on and done puppetry in all sorts of stuff. Amazing puppeteer, brilliant character, and a real brilliant improviser. One of the most demented people you ever meet, and I say that as the biggest compliment possible. I met Victor, who was in the music department as an intern. My buddy Steve, who was in college with me making dopey videos, and a friend of mine, Tony, from high school, got together and formed a company doing puppet stuff. And we had just doing some little local commercially type stuff. And eventually, Victor got a job driving a van for QVC to pay the bills. And he got us in with a producer there. And we brought some puppets in. And we said we could do a character on one of your QVC shows and like sell toys or whatever. You know, really like puppet prostitution when you think about it. But it was, and for whatever reason, they said yes. And so I built the characters. Victor performed them, and I did some here and there as well. And then we did that for a few years, and that was what grounded me, I think, in the East Coast. Along with family and friends and all of that.
Sure,
But
yeah.
that was where it was like, okay, we can make a go of this here. And then as soon as the internet hit, that was when it became like, okay, especially if I'm just doing my own thing here, then yeah, I can kind of be based anywhere.
Yeah.
And you know, the potential of that was clear to me very early. And it was just like, oh, okay, this is gonna change things, because we struggled with that first company. We didn't have a way to connect with anyone. We had no way to get jobs. We were, you know, try to find like an agent and stuff like that. It was just weird. And then, you know, I took some other TV work. I took a job at KB Toys to pay the bills for a little while. I took some other TV work, and that all the while I was building masks, building monsters, making replica props, and finding ways to connect with folks on the internet now and sell stuff I was making and find people making similar stuff and learn more about materials and all of this other stuff. And that's what ultimately, you know, combines with then the movie prop collecting and the fact that making stuff is also fixing stuff, and finding I had this passion for fixing things and a passion for doing it in an archival way that, you know, really was respectful of the material, because to me, I've said this a lot, but like, to me, movie props are some of the highest art of our time. Some of the most brilliant sculptors out there are sculpting monsters in, you know, but behind the scenes on some of your favorite movies, and doing maquettes and doing concept work and, you know, doing makeup directly on people's faces or whatever the hell else. And you know, to have the opportunity to be around that stuff is great. Have the opportunity to help preserve that stuff is something that is meaningful, and not lost on me. And it feels important and satisfying and weighty in a good way, and scary and sometimes a bad way. But all of this stuff just sort of networked its way into this weird mesh, and it became, you know, restoration was something other people weren't doing and weren't offering the way that I could or would or whatever you want to call it. Um, and so, yeah, it was like all of this history meshing with the internet taking off, meshing with the RPF and the building up of prop collecting as a whole with prop store and auction houses, really bringing screen use props to not just, the highest end people, but to the masses and, beyond just museums and things like that. Uh, you know, it just was like, hey, this is it. This is the spot. Like I just,
Amazing.
everything meshed and there's this beautiful little tunnel appeared that was just like, yep, that's where I'm going.
In
And,
the shape of Tom, yeah.
yeah, exactly. It was like this, but it was, I could fit. That was like when Roger Rabbit goes through the window,
That's exactly what I
That's-
thought of when you did that, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
What was the first thing you restored then, or was it an attempt to restore? I mean, did it go well, and like, how much
Yeah.
experimentation was there?
So, I mean, the making rubber masks always involves some level of patching. You never get a perfect casting. There's always seam lines. There's always things like that. So, developing my ability to be cheap and not waste a bad casting and fix it, helped me to develop some of the stuff I would do with restoration. It's just a matter of switching materials into things that would hold up better over time and wouldn't hurt things underneath it. And so some of the earlier stuff, it was stuff that I owned. I had a Marshmallow Man hand from Mr. Stay Puft. There was a polyfoam piece that had a section that had deteriorated away. I thought, it was a very specific section where I said, let me give this a go. Let me see if I can do this. And the biggest thing for me in patching that was I didn't want what I patched to stand out at all, but I also didn't want to repaint the whole thing the way you would like a car restoration or something like that. That to me that's fine for maybe for a car, but for movie props, it's all about preserving every ounce of this you can. So it's the technique in museums is called in painting, and that's where you just paint the repair.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a little obsessed with things like color and stuff like that when it comes to that. I have, luckily for the business I'm in, I'm very lucky to have a very sharp eye for that. It turned out I had a real skill for color matching and for getting that down and making stuff disappear and figuring out how to make those patches not look brand new, how to age what you're doing, etc. And that's one of the first ones. The first Star Wars pieces were getting together with Brandon on that. Stuart Freeborn had parted with his sort of archive of stuff he had kept at one point.
The Ugnaught, yeah.
Yeah.
Ugnaught,
And actually from that was where that paperwork came from. That's where the fly and the pickle head behind me came from. So the Ugnaughts, which are on the Tom Spina design site, I've told the story a million times. If anybody's out there on board, too bad. I'm telling it again. But no, he had brought me, and I said no. I was like, I don't want to ruin them, and he just said, dude, they're ruined already. Like I'm gonna throw them away. They had been stored with newspaper in them for decades, and that had just wicked all the moisture out of them. They were crunchy as hell. They were made out of they were faux latex, but fascinating. They were a really nice case study in how Stewart and Graham worked on that kind of stuff, because even though they were slip masks, they were made with layers of pieces the way you would in appliance. And I assume they did that so that they could put variation into them.
Sure.
And it was really neat the way they were pulled together. And the thing that it taught me actually, the biggest takeaway from that project was, one, I mean, I learned a hell of a lot doing it, and I put a lot of stuff that I had thought about into sort of into the process there. But the thing that that really jumped out at me is it's never as bad as it looks. For as bad as they looked, once I was able to reshape them a bit, once I was able to unfold some things, once I was able to, there were some cases where things wouldn't, no matter what you would do, they wouldn't get flexible again. And you'd have a piece folded in half and you just had to, bravery test, snap, and it's like, you knew you were going to get a crack here, but you were going to get back all of this material. So you'd paint the crack and you'd put that back where it belonged, and you'd do some fabric backing and things to support it on the inside. And it really, there were some of them that looked really, really bad, but when I got them on a form, when I got them unfolded, when I got them, all the puzzle pieces back where they went, there's not a lot missing here. These are actually in pretty good shape, other than the fact that the material is so dried out. And luckily I had come up with some things we could do to help with that. And it was just eye-opening and really, I mean, talk about idols, people like, Stuart Freeborn, or, there are not a lot of people that affected me the way he did.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly his work, especially, and I was very lucky to meet him once. Spend a very, very long time, 5 hours at a curry house talking Makeup and Monsters with P&K. Oh, nice. Goodness. And that to preserve some of that work, it's a really great feeling. And then, to have done that prior to meeting him, actually, and to be able to show him some of that stuff, like, that feels nice too, to be able to, go like, hey, look, we care about what you did. Your legacy lives on. Here it is. We're keeping this around for folks to continue to enjoy. But yeah, those were special pieces, and wound up being the first of many, many pieces that we would restore, and many from Star Wars as well. So yeah, pretty freaking lucky kid. So
yeah, definitely, and including some things from the Lucasfilm archives themselves that you've been tasked to go up there. I mean, that's a moment for a Star Wars fan. The first time walking into the archives there. I mean, I've dreamt about that all my life. No. Gosh. It's getting to the point now where I think it's never going to happen, but who knows?
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Definitely. Big moment in my life the first time I went there. And the first time I went there was not necessarily related to the restoration work. I was just lucky enough to be invited. We had helped out. Folks at the archives were on a commercial set with us. We had built a bunch of creatures for Volkswagen Super Bowl commercial. They had brought some of the prequel aliens to be in the background of our stuff, which we were like, wait, the real things are going to be in the background of ours? No. Okay.
No pressure.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me just I'm going to just do one of these. So these are some of the of the stuff from that. Okay. Anyway.
Amazing.
I always like to keep a little of what we've worked on around me.
Just a handful.
Lucked out that, they were there and got to know them, and running a set like that with a whole bunch of people under masks, it's tough to keep them all alive. And so we helped keep their guys alive. They helped keep our stuff going. And at the end of it, somebody said to me, do you ever get to San Francisco? You should come visit us at the archives. And I said, I'm going to be there in 2 weeks. I wasn't, but I sure as hell was now. Yeah. I said, 2 weeks. I don't know the exact date. What are you guys there that time? Are you going to be around? Oh, yeah, we're around from this date to this date. I said, oh, great. Yeah, I'll send you my dates. Immediately just went back, bought a plane ticket. And I said, okay, no, like, this is happening. This is not a chance I'm ever going to miss. And yeah, stunning, jaw-dropping. I foolishly, I thought it wouldn't be as good as it was. Maybe I was just trying to psych myself out. Maybe I was trying to be, I don't want to build it up too much and be disappointed. There is no building it up too much. There is no disappointment. This was so far beyond anything I ever expected, and it was it's incredible to me how many times I've been back now, and the various things we've done there. But that first trip was just for the fun of going to visit and see some new friends, and but it was at the end of that trip where there were a few things we saw that I pointed out. We might be able to help with that, and let me show you some of the stuff we've done after the fact. Sent them some things, and eventually they sent me a list of things to say, like, what do you think you could do with these? I sent some proposals, and found out after everything was, contracts were done and things like that. I found out that it was actually George himself that specifically signed off on everything that we were going to do, which was a really kind of a cool feeling. And I said, I would have come to sign in person had I known, but I never got that chance yet. But yeah, we very luckily got to work on a whole bunch of stuff. We had just wrapped up. I'm pretty sure the Henson stuff was first. We had the two of them back to back, and I'm fairly certain it was the Henson archives first. So we had done a bunch of stuff for the Museum of the Moving Image, who has an amazing Jim Henson exhibit now, permanent exhibit. Massive gift from the Henson family. We got to go in. I consulted a little bit when they were initially getting the gift on what pieces they were going to take and things like that. And then we did some continuation of that in terms of conservation and, what pieces we could help with, and then what pieces they were going to have some of the Henson Creature Shop work on and things like that. And, we got to have this huge batch of pieces from them come into our studio. So, we have this one stretch of time where the studio is filled with crates of, original stuff from The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and Muppet stuff. And, hard to comprehend. Why is this here? What, all at once. This is crazy. All hands on deck. We all get in. We have some freelancers who work with us and sometimes travel with us and stuff. It's like, nope, you're traveling to home base. Come on. Like, let's do this. We do that whole project, and then, almost no time after that, the phone rings, and it's like, yeah, we're ready to go. And, crate upon crate of stuff from the Lucasfilm Archive shows up to our little studio. And, I have a picture I took from up in the rafters, and the crates are in an L shape around the perimeter of the building because they took up that much space of like our floor space at the time.
I thought you were going to say it was like
over 2 units.
I thought you were going to say it was like Mike Pangrazio's painting at the end of Raiders or something.
Yes,
just
it certainly felt that way to us. We've since taken over. We've more than doubled our space, which is great. So, we're always ready for the next one. But it's so this was another time where it was like we're pulling pieces and pieces out of these crates that were just, mind blowing. They'd be amazing to see in a museum. They'd be amazing to see up close in the archives. So they were. But to have them, directly in front of you, and you're working to conserve this now, is mind-numbing, and it's intimidating, but it's incredible. And it's the culmination of everything I could have hoped for as a restoration artist, as someone who's passionate about conserving movie memorabilia. Those two, right? It had to be the Henson Archives. It had to be the Lucasfilm Archives. I'm just, like a lucky pinball bouncing around and just always happening to hit the flipper. Like, it's insane. It doesn't make any sense.
And beyond those two, I don't want to call them franchises. Beyond those two amazing creative cultures that those people built, Star Wars and the Muppets, I guess one of the most amazing things about your job is the variety of things that come to you. I mean, you must sit there sometimes thinking, what's that next phone call going to be? What's that next email going to be?
Every time.
Is it going to be a museum? Is it going to be a private collector? Is there going to be something unearthed that we didn't know about before?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, beyond that, with all the stuff we do, the bronzes and
Yeah,
the wax figures, custom mannequins and displays for costumes, the giant foam stuff, we got a call for, hey, we need half of the top half of the Statue of Liberty, 20 feet tall. Can you do that? And,
sure.
sure. Right. And that was actually how we got one of the units behind us was I called the landlord and said, hey, somebody's got a big build. It's only going to take us a month. Do you have anything available? Yeah, I got one right behind you. How much? He's smart landlord. He says, free. I was like, oh, son of a bitch. Like he knew as soon as we got our feet inside that unit, we were never letting it go.
Yeah.
You get comfortable. So
Yeah.
it's like, how did we ever operate before we had this space?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, so there's big foam stuff we're building. There's theming rooms out for people. There's, doing digital work even. The variety is a huge, huge part of, especially the Tom Spina Designs business. That was when I left my TV job, which was, I was sitting at the Grass Valley switcher blowing up Alderaan all the
Mm-hmm.
time,
Yep.
going between every time I went to commercial, I'd be like, but
Sounds like my job.
yeah,
That's what I
right.
do. That's what I do. Yeah.
Nice. There you go. Yeah, I was a TD, and
Right.
get on the headset with the
Mm-hmm.
guy at the hockey game, and you're going between the truck and
Yep.
commercial and all of that stuff. But when I left that job, I had a gig. It was a puppet gig that a friend of mine got me doing a latex puppet face for this big tree puppet, and I had just quit. I had just put my notice in, and he calls me up with this job. He says, "Are you available?" I said, I absolutely am. He's like, it pays. It's not quit your job money. And I said, funny story. I found out later he said he was extremely worried for me when he heard that I told him that. But the whole thing there was cast a wide net. Like, this is a creative business. We're creative people. We can do all these different things. Don't lock ourselves down. Let's cast a wide net. We'll see what catches. And we'll be able to have a little fun with it too, because we'll be doing all this different stuff. And yeah, horror stuff comes in, Gremlins come in, things from Christmas movies come in. We just had Buddy the Elf's costume from Elf that everybody got blown away from. We've had a bunch of stuff for the Grinch movie come through. We've had, you name the genre. Name a favorite film. We've probably had something. And it's always cool. It's always something new. It's always a new challenge. We've learned so much along the way doing this stuff. And yeah, the variety, boy, I'm so glad that I cast that wide net, because it definitely makes it, that much more exciting to get to work every morning.
Mm. And with that core work, you've gone into other realms with, Sideshow Collectibles and Regal Robot. You're doing, these reproductions sort of the maquettes that Phil Tippett would have created. You're doing, I saw a bowcaster door handle,
Yeah.
just the carbonite table. I mean, this is kind of the stuff that dreams are made of, to quote the movie line. But also, I think you said in another interview that I heard a while back that it's a kind of, wouldn't it be cool if, is the line,
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be cool if we just had this or that or the other? How do you kind of keep creative, and how do you? There comes a point where you think, I've just plumbed the depths of every idea, and yet something else pops up.
It's so funny because wouldn't it be cool if that comes out of Richard Riley, who is someone that I've been working together with since about 2003, 2004, whatever. He's a foam carver. He's a guy that takes big blocks of styrofoam and hacks away at it until it looks like something cool. And he is a particularly gifted sculptor, and he is my favorite kind of artist. He is a natural. He is someone that doesn't think about technique. He just thinks about what he wants to see. But he's also he's one of my favorite people in the world, one of my best friends. And he constantly is coming up with cool ideas. And wouldn't it be cool if actually started as an insult to him, because he would do it all the time when we were just about done with a project. We'd be just about finished and go, oh, it'd be cool. And then he'd say something that's freaking amazing. And well, great. Now we have to do that. And I'm going to lose, thousands of dollars on this job, but it's cool. We have to do that. So, anytime we were doing a theme room for somebody, anytime we were doing stuff like that, he was always, when we did the hung carbonite table, he did the fabrication on that. He and I came up with the idea, and it was just, we just dueling. Wouldn't it be cool? Rob DiNicola is now at the studio with me for the last 4 or 5 years full time. He had been working with us on the side for years, off the charts design sense. He does a lot of, his technical title is creative director for Regal, but he really is, does all of the marketing for Regal, but is my right hand when it comes to product development. So he posted something. We were having a text conversation last night, and I replied with the Yip Yip Martians from Sesame Street, going yip 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 yip, and they were in like fast forward because it was a GIF, whatever. And he just goes like, "That's us coming up with ideas," and he's not wrong, because we will just sit there. We have a board in the office that whenever we do our live stream videos, everybody always tells it. Then, like, we get the comments. It's like, turn the camera, show us the board. It's like, so we have a board for everything we're working on for Regal. And the comical thing is, we call it everything we're working on. It's 2 36 by 24 cork boards with slips of paper that are like half the size of an index card. And each one of them is a different product that we have in the works at some level. And they're overflowing, filled, they're tacked onto the wall below it. And we still have sheets and sheets of paper with other ideas on them. And it's just like, you sit there and you go, and all the time we're like, oh, we got an idea for a prequel thing. It's like, all right, well, we just got to get through all of this from the OT first, and then we can get there. Like, you would think, you would go, you can't come up with this many ideas for a movie that's that old and still have some fresh idea. You can't come up with a new merchandise for a movie that is from 1977 in 2023 and come up with something no one's done before. And I will say this. So one, look, like, I'm a creative guy. I've worked with very creative people. I'm very lucky to be surrounded by other people that challenge me to be, more creative all the time. But I don't give us the credit for this. I give Star Wars the credit for this. The depth of those movies is, I think, unmatched. There are other movies that maybe have more depth of story. There are other movies that have more history of the characters, or there were books before, or whatever else. The depth of, in particular, the making of those movies, I feel like no other franchise comes near. I think, and I'm thinking this through out loud here. I'll go further and say the unintentional depth. I feel like you could look at Lord of the Rings or more recent movies, and there is more intentional depth to the production. There is more production planning. There's more money. There's all of this, and all of that leads to a longer production time and tons more stuff happening. But the, forced creativity of limitations that happen in the making of those movies is what is our touchstone. That's our, that's my creative recharge. That's my cup of coffee. That's my, anytime I am short on passion, I put in from Star Wars to the eye. Anytime I'm not sure what to make next, I flip through the Chronicles. I pull out for Star Wars Indiana Jones, Best Lucasfilm Archives book. Love that book. I go through the old Marvel comics. Like, there's I look at the action figures. I look at the stuff around me, and instantly, like, it's like, boom. Oh yeah, okay, we're back in it. We're good. Let's do this.
So the question is where's the full-size Declan Mulholland Jabba the Hutt?
Don't you tempt me. Solo. Come out of there, Solo.
Yeah, you're right though. I mean, I think I've said it a few times on the podcast. I heard when, I can't remember her name offhand, but the director of the behind-the-scenes documentary for was it The Force Awakens or was it the last sequel? Anyway, she had said that there's 350 hours of original trilogy behind the scene footage in the archive.
Wow.
Now, my kids are talking to me at the moment about they wanted to go on a vacation on a holiday, and they say, should we go here? Should we go there? I just want to be locked in that room for like
Right?
2 weeks and just
at
watch.
least 350 hours.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And just watch the whole damn thing. Every time I see a snippet of behind the scenes material that I've never seen before, it makes my day. You know, there's just something about, like you say, the depth of that stuff. It just seems never ending.
And that, yeah. And we don't, it's like, how is it possible it's still giving us back, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
how is it possible all these years later, there's still new snippets to see? And to know that for every snippet you're seeing, there's footage on the beginning and end of that
Absolutely.
that editor didn't choose.
Yeah.
And he's just to hurt
just some
you,
dumb editor as well. Like, it's not even not even
the
a
dumb
fan.
editor who has a grudge against you and specifically wants you to feel bad decided, I'm going to cut this off
Just
so
this
that Jamie can only see a part of this.
Do you know, one of the biggest disappointments for the Return of the Jedi anniversary that we just had, the 40th, was that there wasn't one of those videos like they did for the Empire one where they were showing all the, you know, like a 5-minute video. It's like, where is this video? I would have made this video for you, you know. I would have done it for free, man.
Give us a call. We're ready.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. One of the coolest things that came out of, you know, we do these, I became known as, you know, the obsessed Cantina guy, the Spina Cantina, right?
It rhymes, it's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got to start doing these panels at Celebration and going in, you know, super deep. It started out with me and Pablo, and now it was the last one was me and the guys from Blast Points, and Kirk Thatcher joined us, and Amy did as well. And it was just, you know, we have so much fun diving into, you know, the Cantina, Jabba's Palace, whatever, and finding as much of that footage as we can, finding as many of the stories as we can, interviewing everybody that worked on it. Like, you know how it goes, right? You want to know the stuff no one's asked them about before. You want to find out what was the spark that led to their thing that now sparks us. But one of the coolest things that came out of that was Pablo got to dig up that there's a bit of B-roll footage from the Cantina that was shown on the Empire of Dreams documentary initially. And it's, I always called it the brown footage. It's got a very sort of like sepia kind of vibe to it.
I know what you mean,
you'd only seen maybe a handful of shots in it. So he managed to actually pull that full footage for us for one of those panels. I hope the people in the audience that got to see it realize how amazing it is that they got to see the full 8 or 10 minutes of it. That, you know, prior to that, you'd seen maybe 14 or 15 seconds, you know? And it's incredible, the stuff that we pulled out of that footage. I mean, I managed to figure out some stuff about the spacesuits in there. We found some stuff about Alfie Curtis in there, stuff about the blasters in there, because there's a shot where they're showing the somebody putting drops of it looks like not Tums, like Alka-Seltzer or whatever, into the jugs so they'd be bubbling.
Right, yeah.
So he's putting these pellets in to make the jugs bubble, and they kind of pan across, and on the counter you could see some of the blasters. And it's just like, oh, well, that's interesting. You know, there's the amount of stuff that we found in the background of that footage. It's insanely cool. And you know, never seen it before. Yeah, he also pulled the footage of Walrus Man's head on the ground after he was decapitated. The cut scene. And you know, we got to play that for folks, and just, you know, again, it's like people have to realize, like, this doesn't happen. Nobody goes in and pulls footage out of there. This is like, you know, Fort Knox. And so to have the chance to share any of that was amazing. The sharing is nice. Seeing it even better. You know?
I keep thinking there's another project like I could pitch. You know, for years I've thought about doing something that's just from the perspective of Mark Hamill, like his whole journey through the saga, and then you do one on Harrison Ford, and then all with interviews from the time, all with behind the scenes material from the time, you know, do one on Carrie or something like that. Because I just want to see more of this stuff ultimately. And it's like you know, you're making stuff that you want, you know.
Oh, totally.
And I'm in, and you know, and I'm getting to interview people like yourself and like people who worked on the movie, who kind of share that passion. And you know, that book that Justin Berger and I've just made about Return of the Jedi, the timeline book.
Love it.
that's just us putting back into the galaxy that we care about so much. There's just so much love for these movies from so many people. And I think, it's great to see the work you're doing. I was looking through your website again this morning and just just reminding myself I have no money at the moment is the first thing. But secondly, just thinking, wow, the amount of stuff you've come up with your team, it kind of blows my mind actually, because it just when you thought everybody had enough Star Wars stuff, you're coming up with new things that people haven't done.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that, one, I feel just lucky that we get to do it, but two, that if we're gonna do this, we got to do it our way, right? Like if we're gonna do it, you got to put your mark on it. You got to do something different. How many companies are out there making statues of Darth Vader or Stormtroopers or Boba Fett over and over and over again?
Mm-hmm.
That's great for people who like that. The depth of this franchise is such that we can mine it seemingly forever. Like I genuinely can't think of a time where we run out of ideas. Like if I did this for another 20 years, I don't think I could run out of ideas. There's so much that we would love to do. And, just physical limitations come in terms of either what we can physically make, because we do so much of it in-house. We're not some big corporate conglomerate getting stuff made overseas all the time. Like most of the stuff we do is handmade.
Yeah.
But, beyond physical limitations, what you can make, it's also what can people absorb? What can collectors take in? You can't dump thousands and thousands of dollars of merchandise on them all at the same time. They'll go broke, and then we do. So,
who knew that anybody needed a dewback sofa, though? For instance, it's just, I love
one of my favorite things we've ever done.
It's so cool. It's so insane, but it's so great as well.
We only did it because we were doing Star Wars Celebration. It was the first show for Regal Robot at one of the shows. And it was like, I wanted to have a photo op. I wanted to have something that made people would stop and look at and instantly be able to understand us. And, you called it insane and ridiculous, whatever. Great. Terrific. We'll take it. That's what I want. I wanted people to go, wait a minute. Is that sofa a dewback? Or is that dewback a sofa? You got your furniture in my lizard creature,
But incredible that you knew that there was an original casting of the head, and you used that casting.
Yeah.
And again, you're going back to the source material each time to sort of,
that's
find
been,
a way in.
Our big thing now with the archive collection has been, going to the archives and scanning things digitally, high res, and digging deep. We're trying to archive what we can there, but to me, that maquette series. So like that old Smithsonian magazine where there's all the maquettes on the covers, on the cover of it, and the article is basically nothing if you're a prop collector. It's very disappointing, but that cover is amazing, and I picked that up in the early '90s just because of that. And to see all the maquettes in from Star Wars to Jedi and see them all in the Chronicles, where I think that's the coolest thing they did in that book. They could have just shown us Amanaman and Ethonman and Hermie Odal and whoever else. And instead it's, here's the final Regis. Here's how Regis was, looked as a maquette. Here's what the concept for Nine Nub looked like. Here's how Nine Nub looked in the movie. And, that to me is something unique. Again, it's more than just a mini bust of the character. This is the history of the character. This is the story of how it got made. And we're bringing the people who made it into the mix. We're doing the signature editions with them. We're hearing their stories. If I might plug my YouTube channel,
sure.
If you go to Tom Spina Designs on YouTube or Regal Robot on YouTube, I've got interviews I've been doing with, everybody from Phil Tippett and John Berg and Dennis Murin and Ken Ralston and Judy Elkins and Dave Carson, all these people, Chris Wayless, who did all of these maquettes. And I'm asking them ridiculous and terribly nerdy questions about, the most infinite minutia of characters that never even made it on screen, because that's just interesting to us, right? Like, so we go to the archives and we're uncovering ones that we didn't even really know were there before. We're looking, we're like, is that guy, was he in the panning shot from Return the Star Wars Generation? I don't know. We go back to the footage. Oh, there he is. He's behind along that guy, or whatever. And then it's like, well, who the hell made this? And so now you're going through, we're looking on the bottoms of them to try and see, does anybody have initials? Or we're comparing sculpting styles and then going like, hey, Ken, we found this creature. It looks like this weird sort of lizard guy, but the texture on the back looks like Weequay. Is that yours? And, it's like, yeah, look on the back. There should be a KA. Sure enough, there it is, or a KR rather. Ken Ralston, or, I called him Rock Toad. Great. Write that down.
Yeah.
Like that, we've gone through this whole process of figuring out who sculpted what maquette. And out of about 90 maquettes for Return of the Jedi, we're down to only about 10 of them that we don't know who sculpted. Insane that we managed to do that.
But
and
it's like archaeology. Yeah, you're sort of Indiana Jones and Luke Skywalker here. So I feel like we could talk for maybe 350 hours.
That's it.
But I'm sort of also aware that I'm taking you away from creating the next amazing thing as well, Tom. So we should probably call it a day at some point. But I want people to not only look at your YouTube channel and stuff, but can you tell people about your website address and?
Absolutely. Yeah. So TomSpinaDesigns.com or RegalRobot.com. Tom Spina Designs is where we're doing all our restoration, sculpture, all of the theming and theme park work. And then Regal Robot is direct-to-consumer, licensed Star Wars and Indiana Jones stuff. Cool stuff, decor, and things that you never knew that anybody would ever make, and then also prop replicas and things like these great maquettes and life-size busts and all kinds of fun stuff. And then just look for at Tom Spina Designs at Regal Robot, pretty much everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I don't know, we're not really active on TikTok, but we got it squatted.
Friends Reunited.
Pinterest, we're on Pinterest. Yeah,
sure.
all of that stuff that I'm sure somebody's taking care of. But we also have, if you are on Facebook, we have a fan group that was recently built. It was the Regal Robot Fan and Collector Showcase. Just look up Regal Robot Showcase. It'll come up. Join it. It's a lot of fun. We post behind the scenes stuff. We're in the middle of making 50 life-size Tusken Raider busts at the moment. That's actually the first wave of 50. We have 2 more, but and we just posted some pictures from the studio of those in the works. And I love being able to share that stuff.
I'll check
we
those
don't
out.
always get the opportunity to do it. So that's a place to see all the really cool behind the scenes stuff of our studio, what we're working on. So check it out.
Thanks, man. And listen, I appreciate, on behalf of everybody, on this end of what you do, just thanks for doing what you do, because you do amazing work. Your enthusiasm is fantastic, and I just hope that you never run out of ideas. I don't think you're going to, but I just hope you never do.
Thank you very much for that. That means a lot coming from you. I appreciate you having me on and just the fun of chatting. I like we have circulated in the same zones for so long, and just somehow didn't collide, and just finally did. Yeah. I'm so glad we had the chance to chat, and I look forward to chatting some more soon.
Me too, man. Yeah, next time I'm in the States, I'll give you a call. I'll take you for dinner or something, and we can chat some more.
Oh, I'll take that. Yeah.
All right, man. Good to speak to you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Tom there. It was recorded back in July 2023, but given some of the time-sensitive, time-crucial episodes I've released recently, poor Tom got put on the back burner, but I'm pleased to have finally got this episode out. He's a great guy, and I hope to catch up with him in person in the coming years or months, hopefully. Coming up on the podcast, I have my conversation with author John Walsh about his 2 newest books on the Conan films and on The Wicker Man, the official story of. I've also just recorded a great conversation with 2 of the VFX supervisors that worked on Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. That'll be a bonus episode, maybe this month, if I can find the time, or it'll be the first episode of January 2024. In January, I also have a number of interviews lined up. Don't want to give away too much now, but more on those later. Keep the support coming. I do really need you. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you can do so for the next episode of the Filmumentaries podcast.
weirding, wavy